working, like 5 in the morning till 2 the next morning, coming home for like an hour's sleep. It just didn't pan out. And I'm actually grateful because obviously throughout that, I eventually met you, started at Solucru, and I've never looked back.
Welcome back to another episode of Solucru Talks. I'm Jonathan Sellers, CEO of Solucru, and today we have a very special episode, a little bit different than the norm. So normally we're talking about our digital marketing, web design, web development best practices, and we're talking specifically to you small business owners and entrepreneurs out there who are looking for tips and best practices and guidance around how to take your business next level. Today, though, we thought we would peel back the curtains a little bit. And so we're going to do a little behind the scenes for one of our key team members. So today I am joined again by our Director of Digital Marketing, Seaton Theart. Welcome, Seaton.
Always good to be here.
Yeah, so Seaton's on the hot seat today. So Seaton is going to give a little bit of background today on how he got into this whole digital marketing world, how he got into web design, web development world specifically. And then we're going to talk about some of the biggest lessons he's learned through that process that led to kind of the philosophies that we use at Solucru when we're building client websites. We have been building quite a number of websites. We're pacing at around 20 websites per month now. So thank you guys so much for the support. Thanks for the trust you're putting in us. But we're cranking out lots of websites this week, so I had to pull him away. And basically we're gonna dig into his background. So I thought, Seaton, we would start off by just getting to letting everybody get to know you a little bit better. So Seaton's done a lot of different things. He came through a variety of backgrounds. Maybe give the people a little bit of background on how you got into this space.
Oh, absolutely. So you've kind of touched on it. I was never in digital marketing. That's not where I truly started. One of my very first proper jobs was at a company. They were very much ahead of their time. It was a nightlife events company, and we used to go and send out photographers to nightlife events, and we would capture the nightlife, capture them in their moment. You'd come visit the website, and we would be selling ad space. So there's a little bit of digital marketing there, but it's before the era of Facebook, before Instagram. As crazy as that sounds, they weren't big players yet.
So Facebook had just started.
Well, actually, some of it is just before Facebook started, and then the rest of it, Facebook had started. Very much still in their infancy, very much
the MySpace era.
Absolutely, the MySpace era. And I started there as a content administrator. So I was the person uploading the content to the website, making sure it's clean, making sure the photos our photographers took adhere to protocols. We obviously don't want to embarrass people. It's a nightlife environment, so people are drinking. You don't want to misrepresent who they are. So keeping that stuff all good. From there, I eventually got promoted to the office manager, and then got very involved in the website rebuild, and we were doing a lot of things with technology. We actually, eventually Instagram became a player, and we actually had a technology that basically integrated with Instagram. Again, very ahead of its time. We were doing facial recognition, all kinds of things like that. The long and the short of it, we were competing against giants at that stage. So inevitably that business it wasn't feasible anymore.
Yeah.
People started using Instagram. You don't need a photographer anymore because I can just snap it, post it to Instagram. So it lost its steam. From there, funny enough, I ended up on a very different trajectory, ended up in the film industry. So within the film industry, I obviously learned a lot about just in general how that industry works, how they market things, how they take content, how they edit content. So it was a lot of post-production knowledge that I gained. There I was a studio manager, so we also rented out our space, ran events. But the bigger piece that ties into digital marketing is I was a one-man band in terms of marketing our studio.
Okay.
So getting overseas clients to rent our studio to come and do a production there, getting events there. So not only then did I start at that point, I met Richard. He's another. I did. Let me correct that. I didn't meet him. Him and we went to school together, so I've known him for many years. But at that point, he introduced me to WordPress.
Okay.
He really got me started on the WordPress path. Before that, a lot of the stuff I knew of was very custom development. He introduced me to that. While I was in the film industry, I started using that skill set. I was also upskilling myself in the background, doing a lot of short courses, online courses, whatever I could to learn more about it. He obviously taught me a lot as well. And I would use that knowledge to basically rebuild our studio website. And then I would use that knowledge to also then, because even back when I was at this other company, we did Facebook marketing, all the general marketing things you could do.
Okay.
And then just through that, it was constantly just upskilling myself, doing multiple courses. I eventually did a computer sciences course, because originally I really wanted to do the coding. It never panned out, but I know a lot of coding languages just from, again, upskilling myself.
It was significant work in that space, but then that led you into kind of just like a lot of you out here who may have seen the title of this video and said, okay, I'm actually in a similar space. I'm trying to get into this. I want to do this. This is the path I want to go on with web design. A lot of times people fall into that, right?
Yep.
And so that's kind of how you had opportunities in front of you and you seized those opportunities.
Absolutely. And also something I probably didn't mention, I know I've mentioned it on one of our previous Solucru Talks episodes, is that even while I was the manager of this film studio and we had all these productions, and again, I must say the film industry, one of the reasons I did actually want to pivot is I barely sleep at all. I mean, I know you know this, Jonathan. That's me.
Yes.
But the film industry is very hardcore. It's very, very long hours. It's not glamorous. It's not everybody. They think, I would love to be in film. It can be glamorous if you may be like a director, if you really one of the high ups on the production team. But anyone else, you're just a background player, and it's a very, very harsh industry, very, very long hours. So for that's one of the reasons I wanted to pivot. And then obviously COVID really expedited that pivot, because COVID kind of put a stop to filming.
Yeah.
And but during my stint in the film industry, and it was a good stint, it was a good 4 years that I spent.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask.
It was a good 4 years that I spent in the film industry. And during that stint, again, Richard and we actually started a WordPress web development company. You know, we offered hosting, we were building websites, we had a good amount of clients. But it also became very difficult at that time in our life to manage that, because it's a part-time endeavor, couldn't really give it the attention it deserves. Again, film industry, very long hours. And Richard at that time, he was still doing one of his many degrees, you know, because he's also he comes from a lecturing space.
Yep.
And throughout that period he was very busy with studies as well, and lecturing and doing a part-time gig. I'm in the film industry working, you know, like 5 a.m. till 2 the next morning, coming home for like an hour sleep, back to set, and then you're trying to do a part-time business. It just didn't pan out. And I'm actually grateful, because obviously throughout that I eventually met you, started at Solucru, and I've never looked back.
Yeah. And I would agree with that. And just for context, so the Richard that Seaton is referring to is our senior developer. It's Richard Wickham. He's been on a couple Solucru Talks, so you maybe can go scroll through our playlist, Solucru Talks playlist, and find a video featuring Richard, or some of our shorts as well feature Richard. So I would imagine this will be an interesting conversation to learn Richard's path in between some of this context that you have with him, because Richard did, you know, from there go on to be a senior lecturer. We actually stole him from that life and brought him to be our senior developer here at Solucru. So it's an interesting how life works. But as many of you may see, sometimes to get to this path. It's you. Life
Absolutely.
guides you to this path.
Absolutely.
And I think that's going to go into some of, to kind of the point of this video. So here we are. So now you know where Seaton came from. You know how he came to Solucru. So let's get started, Seaton. So what would you say is, if you just had to, let's shoot for 5 lessons you've learned today. What will be maybe the most important lesson? Let's start that way.
I would say for me the most important lesson, and I do want to clarify, this is still something we sometimes struggle with, is managing client expectation. And it starts with the onboarding, really. That's often where things can fall apart. We've had videos about this explaining things people should look out for on both sides, whether you're the developing team or whether you are the client. There's certain things you really do want to clarify immediately, just get total transparency. We're very transparent about what our offering is, but I would say the number one thing I learned when I started this is managing client expectation and also aligning what the offer is. Many clients, especially when you freelance, they have a preconceived idea of what a website build entails. I would say a lot of clients think, well, you built my website, so now just for the life of that website, anything goes wrong, I need anything, I can just call out to you. But and that wouldn't be a problem if it was like, I'm going to call out to you, you're going to quote me on but for most of them, they thinking, no, it's just like you're just going to do it because you built the website.
If you are a new web designer and you're thinking about how do you package your services, one of the things that's most critical in this regard is to explicitly define, as Seaton says, that once the website handover, meaning once the website is published, maybe you've said to them, for 30 days, I'm going to support the website after it goes live, right? Or you say, once the website is published, there is no support. Or you say, hey, that for a nominal fee, whatever that is, ongoing, monthly, I'm on retainer for you to help. And then this is what that entails. But even there, you have to define what does that entail, because it's a lot different to say, for a small fee monthly, I'm going to be here to update plugins and things like this, than you say, I need 10 more pages built, and I'm going to just spend those
Correct.
10 pages out. That's
Correct.
two totally different things, because it's two different workloads.
I wouldn't say it's just the freelance space, because even we deal with this all the time. But especially when I was doing this as what I would classify as a freelancer, I realized very quickly people would assume that if I approach you to build my website, you're just going to take care of everything. Like, I don't have content, but you're just going to fabricate content for me. I don't have any good images, but you're just going to find images for me. So I think that especially is another thing that has to immediately be confirmed.
Yes, exactly. We definitely have that as an ongoing issue. So let's say, okay, so that's the lesson, right? So then what are some things we've done at Solucru to mitigate this this lack of clear expectations?
Well, I think what we've done is we've we've packaged a lot of it together. We've said, well, look, the expectation for most clients is you're going to write copy for me. Fine, we'll write the copy for you. The expectation for most clients is you're going to source imagery for us. Great, we're going to source images for you. But what we do during the onboarding is we have methods we use to collect information from you, as much information as possible. So we ask you, hey, do you have a logo? If you have a logo, yeah, just click this link, you can share the SVG file with us. Do you have brand guidelines? Perfect, just pop it in here, and we'll work off the brand guidelines. Do you have any professional imagery that's ever been shot for your brand or your products? Again, just it's a simple form. It's a custom built form we use, and it works with Monday.com, which we use as our project management tool. But the thing is, it means everything on that one simple form. We can gather everything we need from the client to be successful in the project, and the items that they are unable to give us anything. So let's say they can't give us imagery. We do immediately pose the question, do you need us to source images for you? With the copy, okay, they haven't provided copy, so you need us to basically generate copy with you.
Yeah.
Or for you, I should say.
All right, so what would be your second lesson?
This is something that we reference regularly. There's multiple videos. The reason we reference it so much, it's true to actually show how important it is. So I would definitely say the performance part of the equation. A lot of people don't even look at that. If you're currently a freelance developer, that might be something you don't even consider, because a lot of WordPress, especially if you're using premium themes, they all sell on the concept of, hey, we've developed this to be super performant. But what a lot of end users forget is that is if you're using it stock standard as they've prepared it. But now when you start adding plugins and you start adding your own content and doing all your customizations, that performance just drops completely.
Yeah, and so I will 100% vouch for this. This is one of the most surprising things working with our web team here at Solucru that I have found. We are currently launching websites that have Google PageSpeed Index scores of 98 on mobile, 99 on desktop, and that's a site with a lot of custom elements. It's not a one-page site or something like that. This is a full website, multiple service pages, and still hitting those in what I would consider insane performance scores. Let's just maybe hit some bullet points of what are some areas for our web designers, web developers out there. What are some areas, like top-level checklists, that we're looking to make sure we're doing to hit these performance scores?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a very quick rundown of them. So first of all, server. We obviously have very good server, allocation for our websites. So again, if you're building websites as a freelancer or you're doing your own thing as a business, you want to make sure you have sufficient server resources to actually host those websites. So that's the first thing. When we host websites, we ensure we've got the correct server allocation for these websites. If we talk just in the WordPress environment itself, it is minimizing the amount of plugin usage.
Right.
Image optimization. You want to keep that image looking clean, no blurriness, no pixelation, but bring that image size down as far as possible. Again, why do we want to reduce image size? The bigger the image size for every image you have on the website, again, when the page loads, it's got to load all these resources, it's got to load those files. Bigger they are, the longer the load time means your website's going to take longer to load. Another thing we have with our websites is we do have a free CDN. So we always have a CDN, so that means if you are in South Africa, even if your server is in the USA, it's actually routing it to serve from South Africa, which means it cuts down that travel time.
And it stores like a cache in the
Correct,
South Africa
correct.
server in that case.
And that's what you've just touched on as well, is caching. So caching is another thing that a lot of people, it's a little bit, some people don't even consider it. Others, again, like when I was freelancing back in the day and when we started all of this, Richard and I, we would implement caching. But it was kind of like, okay, turn the plugin on there. It's caching. It's not that. There's a lot of manual work, and Richard does a lot of this manual work to really get our websites performant, where you've got to go and tailor every little setting within that caching plugin to really get it to perform as well as it can. caching, again, for those that don't know, it's essentially just storing a preloaded version of your content so that when a user lands on the page, it doesn't have to load everything anew. It only has to fill in the blanks, which again means it's much quicker to load.
I'm gonna pause here because if you're beginning into the web design space, or if you're a business owner and you're like, this all sounds insane, this is insane, right? So so if you are not doing this, this is crazy stuff you will never think of. You don't know how it works. There's no reason for you to know how it works. But if you're the person who's going down the web design path, I strongly suggest you start doing research on this, because
Absolutely.
This will only become more and more important. It's only been becoming more and more important. And I will say, for a while, it was looked at as an SEO ranking factor, is how fast is your page loading. I don't know that it's so much as an SEO ranking factor, but what it really is a trust factor and a user experience factor. If your site takes a long time to load, if people have slower internet speeds, or whatever the case may be, right, and it takes a while for your site to load, they leave. They never see your site. So then, they don't exist as far as it goes for your business. So Seaton, that's your second lesson. And I think that's a super important one. That's one I am super proud of you guys for what you've done in that capacity. But what's your third lesson learned?
The third one, I would say, comes more from a management side of the equation, and that is project scope. And what I mean by project scope, you can also call it project creep, is quite often when you talk to a client and you in that initial onboarding, you have a discussion. What do you need? What functionality do you need? What does the website look like? I would say what happens is you assign a timeline based on what you've discussed and your knowledge of how long these particular tasks take. And what I have learned, and it's still something that even now we are trying to perfect, we have a lot of systems in place to perfect this, but we also realize we have a lot of clients, so different deadlines, things. But I will say, even as a freelance, I quickly realized not to underestimate how long things take. Because before you know it, certain things are more complicated than they sound. And I think that's a big thing for clients as well with web design. And I think if you are trying to get into this space and you've been sold on like the WordPress makes it so easy, I think that's kind of the problem. This narrative has been created that WordPress makes it so easy that, even the most complicated things, it's install a plugin and it works. The reality is to build a good, well-functioning, good-looking website with a bunch of good features, it's actually a lot harder than one would think. And quite often the request from a client that sounds simple, like to a client it's like, yeah, that's a simple request. Quite often those are the ones that actually prove to have the challenge behind it, because what's simple on the front end might have a lot of work on the back end, and that's what the client doesn't see. So to them it's like, this should just take you like 10 minutes, and it's like you don't actually realize on the back end this might be a 2-3 hour endeavor.
I think that one is definitely a critical component of doing this type of thing. I would say for us, right, so we use Monday.com. You mentioned that earlier.
Yeah.
For us, our core website project, and this is a standard website. So a standard website that is just say a service-based business. You have you're collecting leads with forms, things like that. Maybe a basic e-commerce site with a few products or something like that. Our standard, basic, before anything crazy, before any custom functionality, any crazy ideas that someone may have, our standard website project is 79 hours.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what, and that's every step, or it's very detailed. How many steps is that? That's like, that's a lot of steps.
That's a lot of steps.
Now, taking one step back from being in that space where you're leading that team, right? So stepping back to my perspective as the CEO, and then also with Simon Boyer, our director of operations, as we now think about scaling our team, having this, and then having the dashboards we've also built higher level dashboards to see all the web projects we have in place now that we have so many, for sure. It really helps with being able to like project staffing. When do we need to add another designer? When do we need to add more copywriters, more graphic designers, more developers? You know, where does that hit in? Because now we can see the workloads and everything like that. That's been game changer.
Absolutely.
It's been a huge changer. So I think let's go for one more lesson, Seaton. What is one more lesson you learned?
I would say, and I'm going to actually put two together.
Okay, perfect.
It is security and maintenance. So we have touched on this before, but there's a very particular reason I mention this. So I have in the past built websites, handed them over. It was never in the agreements that I would do maintenance on the site or anything like that. So the maintenance was for the owner. They had to ensure their site is maintained. And then many years later, that business owner would reach out to me and they'd be like, hey, you know, we want to make some changes to our website. And they understood, because again, at that point I had learned, you know, be fully transparent of what it entails and what they're getting. So they would approach me and they'd say, hey, can you quote us? We just want to add this one page. And, you know, with this content. And I'd say, oh, yeah, you know, one page, easy, you know, no problem. I'll quote you. And then when I regained access to the website, I was in the thick of things, because I soon realized, wait a minute, I've quoted them for this edition of this one page, and I'm looking at the website and I'm like, man,
they never did maintenance.
There's been no maintenance done. And especially if you are starting out as a freelancer, do not get caught in this. It will be a nightmare for you, because what that means is, in good faith, first of all, I can't leave their website in that condition, because it's like, man, this is you introducing all kinds of vulnerabilities. And quite often the tools I'm going to need to build that one page are now out of date. So it's forcing me to do an update on those tools so that I can build out what I need to build out. The problem is, the minute you run that update, because it is so out of date, quite often it breaks things. Because what people don't realize is, when plugins are updated, they introduce new features, they introduce bug fixes and things like that. But if you haven't been updating your system, you might not even have the piece that caused the bug fix to be necessary. That sounds crazy, but what it means is, now you update this one plugin, and it's actually been updated for a very specific version of, let's say, your theme, or a very specific version of your WordPress. Now you are so out of date that you actually end up introducing additional breakages and bugs, because the two aren't actually aligned. And again, if you are doing site maintenance, that's why even when we do our site maintenance packages, we always have essentially a staging site where we test plugin updates, theme updates, etc., any updates we would do, just to ensure there are no breakages. But if you are constantly facing that as a battle, it will cripple you
forever.
It will cripple you as a business, because basically that one pager wasn't profitable for me. Like, the hours I invested into that project wasn't profitable for me. And the thing is, as a business owner, when you don't do those updates and you know, the plugin updates, and you're not doing that maintenance, you actually introduce vulnerabilities in your site. Because quite often, normally when you use plugins on a WordPress website, you're trying to go for the most popular ones, because they have the most users, which means they have good reviews. So you will typically know, oh, this plugin is trustworthy.
They have people.
They have
actually
people.
Working
They've
on
got
that
a
plugin.
development team. They are consistently doing updates. The problem is because they're also the most popular, they are the ones that hackers and people that are looking to do damage to websites are targeting, because they know this plugin is popular. So if I can find a leak, if I can find a break in that plugin where I can get my malicious code to work while it's going to infect, 300 million people, for example.
Right.
And that's kind of the problem there. So if you aren't doing those updates and a vulnerability like that is introduced, now again, we just said this is a popular plugin, so they've got a development team. They realize there's a vulnerability, they're going to fix it. But you're not doing the update. So for you, that vulnerability just continues living on your website.
And your data is exposed.
Absolutely, absolutely. Another real world example is, again, Richard and I, one of our very early clients, we built a website for them. They never maintained it. And because of that, eventually they contacted us the one day. Someone had managed to hack into it, and it was basically serving very, very
They
adult.
just overtook the
It
site.
just basically overtook the site, and their site was now serving adult content.
If the people who built your site are not maintaining your site, when that major break happens and you go try to find them, they may, they have no obligation to fix it at this point, because the agreement was that you were going to keep up with it. And so they may say, I'm not getting involved with this. They may not even be building websites anymore. That's that's a thing. The other thing is, you go to an agency and say, hey, this is the problem. Now they may charge you more than it costs to get your site built to fix it, because now they have to go reverse engineer how it was built, right? So it's a peace of mind to just go ahead and pay for that, because even more than that, data privacy laws are becoming more and more prevalent across the world. Started with GDPR as the first major one. Here in South Africa, we have POPI, P-O-P-A-I, I believe. California has CCPA. Across the U.S., states are adopting these privacy laws, and so there's real ramifications for not protecting user data, and without keeping your site maintained and keeping your security maintained, your business is at risk. There's also, I'll throw this as a 6 bonus, because you hit 4 and 5 there, user accessibility.
Oh yeah.
Which I would say it's maybe not necessarily like a big lesson you've learned so far, but it is something now that is also becoming more and more prevalent, because it is now becoming, in the U.S. specifically, and I believe in Europe as well, it's becoming more of a...
I completely agree with you. Accessibility is a thing we always knew about. We always had some form of accessibility, but I'm happy for the accessibility push, because even in my experience, I knew about it. We would, to an extent, make sure there's some accessibility, but it's not something we pushed for, and it's something we should be pushing for. So I'm happy that this push is happening now to really make this a global standard. So that is becoming a factor. And again, if you're just starting out in this, maybe you're an experienced web developer, now you really have to bring that accessibility into the fold and into your planning of a website. Now, there's a lot of plugins that do this. You may want to utilize a plugin. There's some really good plugins. But even with the plugins, you got to test that it doesn't break things on your site.
Or hit the performance, because it could definitely hit the performance.
And the performance, absolutely. Yeah. That's the big one.
And that's like Accessibility, Ayubenda, there's a few big ones. But some of it just comes down to things like UI, UX, like making sure that especially like on mobile, that buttons are not too close together, that text is not on, similar color backgrounds and things like that. So some of it is just logical things.
Oh, absolutely.
Some of it is back-end functionality. Like ideally, you would have the site set up to be able to be read by a
screen reader
yes. And things like that. And yeah, so just lots of things there. There's so many more things we could talk about, Seaton, but I think let's wrap it up for today. I think if I hope you've enjoyed this insight into Seaton's background and his path to get to be a director of a digital marketing agency, working with clients across the globe, and working on lots of website projects, from small business entrepreneurs, people just getting started, all the way up to businesses with multi-hundred locations at the same time, working on various different types of projects. And if that's the path you're on, follow his advice here, and follow some of the things I would give advice on as well. Keep learning as much as possible. Always in this space, we have to keep learning. We didn't talk about this much, but utilize AI, embrace it, find efficiencies. If you're a small business owner, entrepreneur, I hope you're taking into advice some of these learnings as well when you're looking at your next website build. We're always happy. So for Solucru, we would love to talk to you about your website project. If you're looking to get into the space, maybe you want to join a team, reach out. We would be happy as well to discuss, possibilities with as our team grows. But if you're still here, as always, we always like to ask, please like and subscribe. Click on the bell icon if you're on YouTube, watching this on YouTube, so you can get notified for our next YouTube Solucru Talks. Yeah, thanks again, Seaton. I think this was a great conversation. Lots of insights for the people.
Always good to be here.
Yep.
It's been a good one.
Yep. See you next time.